I can draw a heart with my voice. I can draw a spinning cube with my voice. These visuals were not made to accompany the sound. What you see literally is the sound. By using the left audio signal for horizontal motion and the right audio signal for vertical motion, you can make sounds that draw shapes. And if you can draw with sound, you can draw with music. Seriously, the animation you just saw literally is the music you just heard. The music is its own music video. This is oscilloscope music. Oscilloscope music has had a few moments of internet fame. You may have heard of names like Jeremy Fenderson, Chris Allen, Luma, Starseed, Anthony Hall, or others. Or maybe this is your first time hearing about it. The reason it's called oscilloscope music is because you can actually display it on this old piece of analog hardware called an oscilloscope. The left and right speaker voltages respectively move this beam horizontally and vertically. Oscilloscopes are meant for analyzing electrical signals, but eventually people figured out how to use them for mind-blowing audiovisual masterpieces. And now, we're going to find out exactly how that's done. Forget about sound entirely for a moment. We're going to trace a heart with this moving point. The point always has an x-coordinate and a y-coordinate. Shocking, right? We can plot each coordinate over time and see that we have two graphs. Don't these graphs look exactly like audio waveforms? What would happen if we fed these signals straight to our speakers? Let's start with the y graph and feed it into the right speaker. We need to be doing this way faster though. Let's speed up the signal to repeat 220 times per second, the frequency of the music note A3. Now let's repeat that with the X graph and the left speaker. And finally, we combine both axes to see and hear our beautiful heart in the flavor of A3. That is how you draw shapes with sound on an oscilloscope. That is the connection between what you see and what you hear. You can do this process with anything that you can draw by tracing a path. You can even make a drawing explaining how drawing with sound on an oscilloscope works with sound on an oscilloscope. The only limits are your imagination and your sample rate. Of course, sometimes figuring out how to draw something this way is the hard part, but we're going to keep it simple today. Usually people's next question is, okay, but how do you draw 3D stuff with sound if you only have the X and Y sound channels? Join me in the third dimension for a minute. We have the shape we want to draw with sound, an octahedron. We're going to trace the shape in 3D, but then we're going to look at its shadow, because its shadow is 2D. We can even rotate the shape around before looking at the shadow. But now that we have a 2D shadow, we're in business, because at this point, we're just tracing a 2D path as described earlier. In other words, it's the same idea as if you were drawing this with pen on paper. You can draw a fully 3D looking shape on a flat paper. It is the 2D coordinates of the pen strokes which are then used as the left and right audio signals. And it's the same idea for dimensions higher than 3D. Under the hood, the shape is computed in its true n-dimensional space. You just have to project that all the way down to 2D so you can then route X and Y to left and right. So at its core, oscilloscope art is usually more like listening to drawings than drawing with sound, which doesn't sound as cool. But don't worry, oscilloscope music goes so much deeper than just listening to some drawings, and we're going to cover certified wizardry today. The most important topic to address right now is, why is oscilloscope music so hard to compose? Let's say I want to play a chord of triangles. We'll play this C triangle on the left, and this G triangle on the right. I want you to stop for a second and predict what you think will happen when I play these two notes together. Think about what you will hear and what you will see. Pause the video to come up with your prediction if you need to. You ready? Let's take a look. Did you guess this would happen? If so, unfortunately you're wrong. I really wish it were that easy. This is what really happens. It sounds as expected, but it doesn't look like a specific shape at all, let alone two triangles. Why is it doing this? Let's look at the two triangles separately. We have these two vectors moving around their origins triangularly at different speeds. When we play them together, we simply add the two vectors together at every instant. As you can see, the sum of the vectors creates a different path entirely. What's more is that the C and G notes I picked at least make a stable drawing together. If I picked different notes, it could be very unstable. I'll explain why that was unstable later when I talk about Lissajous patterns. As it turns out, the fundamental constraint of oscilloscope music is you usually can't play multiple sounds at the same time. There are exceptions, and we'll get to that. But given any sound that looks like something, adding another sound means the sound wave is now different, so the path trace is different, so your sound probably doesn't look nice anymore. In fact, if you route normal music through an oscilloscope, it just looks like squiggles. You might have a bass line combined with leads and harmonies, maybe some long drum samples, then you have reverbs, echoes, other effects. That's a whole jumble of sounds playing at once. Hence, the oscilloscope shows a whole jumble of squiggles. But when composing oscilloscope music, you don't have the freedom to play all those sounds together, which is extremely musically limiting. So now let's backtrack a little bit. I want to draw three triangles. We now know that we can't just play three triangle sounds together. Recall from earlier that we want to draw this the same way we would draw it with a pen on paper. So maybe I'll draw the left triangle, then the middle triangle, then the right triangle. Now let's watch and listen on an oscilloscope. Look at that, it works. And also it sounds like a chord. What's up with that? Let's take a closer look. We're drawing the same triangle 3 times in different locations. So relative to the changing location, the triangle drawing stays the same every time. Let's look at the Y graph and I'll rotate the shape for clarity. You can actually split this into two waveforms, the triangle waveform and the location waveform. As you can see, the triangle waveform repeats 3 times as fast as the location waveform. This makes sense because you're drawing the same triangle 3 times in 3 different locations. So, forgetting about visuals for a second, only thinking about sound, you are playing one sound at some frequency, and you are playing another sound at 3 times that frequency. Turns out, this 3-to-1 frequency ratio is approximately a 5th note interval plus 1 octave. It sounds like a chord because it literally is a chord. What about drawing 5 triangles? Now the frequency ratio, 5-to-1, is approximately a major third interval plus 2 octaves. By this point, it shouldn't be a surprise for me to say that harmony in music comes from physical resonance of the waveforms. In fact, splitting an octave equally into 12 notes, which is how most Western music is tuned, creates frequency ratios that are very close to whole number ratios. This is why those note intervals sound good. Harmony is literally resonance. And now that we have this technique to draw the same shape in different locations, we can bring harmony into oscilloscope music. We can have 2 sounds playing at the same time while the image still looks recognizable, which I emphasized earlier is usually not possible. I'll call this technique the duplicator technique for obvious reasons. You can get creative with how you duplicate the bass shape. You can do it in a fractal pattern, like the Sierpinski triangle. You can do it in a 3D pattern. Or even in a 4D pattern. The duplicator technique is one of my major weapons of choice. If you watch both my tracks, Synesthesia and Anesthesia, you'll notice several sections completely depend on the duplicator technique. Now, let's move on to my next major weapon of choice. And just like last time, we're going to derive it together. Join me. Let's go way back to basics. A circle. A cosine wave on the x-axis, a sine wave on the y-axis. The point is rotating at a constant angular speed. But who says the angular speed has to be constant? We can have the point speed up and slow down, like this. Now the x and y graphs look completely different. Since these graphs are the sound waveforms, the circle now sounds completely different. Let's give it a listen. We can speed up and slow down twice per fundamental cycle instead of once, or 3 times per fundamental cycle, or even 10 times per fundamental cycle. This technique is called frequency modulation, because we are modulating the frequency at which we trace the shape. As you just saw, frequency modulation lets you get many different sounds out of the same shape. One last thing about frequency modulation. You don't have to evenly speed up and slow down the path tracing as I described earlier. You can take any path imaginable to draw the shape, and it can sound vastly different while still looking about the same. The sound doesn't come from what the shape looks like, the sound comes from the specific path used to draw the shape. Another example of this is I could use the voltage of my voice recording to control the angle of this point around a circle, so my voice literally traces a circle. The distortion gets pretty awful, but it's still fun for the sake of knowledge. Now, some of you are going to say, this is phase modulation, not frequency modulation, which is true, but they can be equated because frequency is the derivative of phase. So, as you can see, duplication and frequency modulation are both insanely powerful techniques. These alone, if used well, can bring any oscilloscope composer to wizard status. Now that we have a good understanding of what's going on under the hood, let's have some fun. What do traditional audio effects like filters or reverb look like? Let's find out by putting some effects on this cluster of octahedra. Here's a quick overview of why these audio effects produce these visuals. A low-pass filter removes high frequencies. Quick movements and sharp turns are high frequencies, so the image smoothens out when they're gone. Reverb is complicated, but you can imagine that you are adding a small amount of motion. The added motion is about the same frequency as the input shape, so it looks pretty stable. Distortion shifts each point a little bit. This shift is not random and does not change, so you get a consistent warping no matter what your input shape is. Downsampling means that instead of constantly moving, the point will linger somewhere for a small, fixed amount of time before moving to the next spot. Phaser is also complicated. Some frequencies are quieted while others are left alone. This just means the shape will look different. Which frequencies are quieted versus left alone changes over time. This means the flavor in which the shape looks different will also change over time. For more examples of traditional audio effects on oscilloscope visuals, I recommend this video by Avia, Putting Audio Effects on Text. It's a great watch. Here's another fun question. What do visual effects, like warping, sound like? Because you're treating your two-channel sound samples like X and Y coordinates, you can transform them like X and Y coordinates. Here's some fun examples. You can treat each point as a complex number and take the complex square, or the complex cube. You can treat the values as polar coordinates by using the y as the angle and the x as the radius. You can make your shape thick. Any transformation you can imagine can be done. My personal favorite is to take all the points of your input audio and essentially round them to the closest points on a different shape. Check out some non-oscilloscope music rounded to a tesseract. This round to shape technique is extremely powerful when composing oscilloscope music because your input audio doesn't have to look stable at all. The output is forced to look stable regardless. Recall from earlier that keeping the image stable is important and difficult in oscilloscope music. Of course, this technique comes at a cost. As a wise man once said, nothing is free in oscilloscope music. That was actually me. I said that. If you have any electric guitar or music production background, you might notice that these visual transformations all kind of sound like distortion. And that's because they're all doing the same thing under the hood. I don't mean your guitar pedal is literally rounding the input audio to a tesseract, but the key of distortion is that it maps input voltage to output voltage in some non-linear way. Long story short, the mapping being non-linear is why distortion has the audio qualities that it does. This isn't a video essay on distortion, so hopefully you can just take my word for that. But these visual transformations are also nonlinear mappings of an input point to an output point, so they sound like distortion, even if sometimes it's a very weird or harsh distortion. Last but certainly not least, we need to talk about Lissajous patterns. This is so important to the topic of oscilloscopes. Some of you are probably wondering why this wasn't the first thing I talked about. Let's have a 3 Hz sine wave going horizontally and a 2 Hz sine wave going vertically. If we combine them, we get a sense of an intricate looking path. Now we'll speed it up to see and hear it. That looks awesome, and it sounds like a chord. Remember how resonance is harmony? Let's try this with different whole number ratios. These are Lissajous patterns. These are what it really means to draw with sound, because the sound waves are the drivers and the image simply emerges. The process I've described in the rest of this video is kind of the reverse, where the image is the driver and the sounds are what emerge. Want to know something they don't tell you in school? You can use more than just 2 axes for your Lissajous patterns. So we can have 3 sine waves with whole number frequency ratios, each driving the points x, y, and z coordinates. We then project that 3D point to 2D, as described earlier, to drive our left and right audio signals. We can also have 4 sine waves with whole number frequency ratios, driving the points x, y, z, and w coordinates. Want to know something else they don't tell you in school? The waves driving each axis don't have to be sine waves. They can be whatever wave you want. Let's try it out with this waveform. So you can have chords with several notes using any sound wave arranged geometrically. If you think that sounds fantastic for making music, you're absolutely right. There's just one big complication here. You know how I mentioned earlier that an octave split equally in 12 has frequency ratios that are very close to whole number ratios? They're very close, but they're not exact, and this is a problem. Let's take a look. This is the Lissajous pattern of a 5th note interval in 12-tone equal temperament. It's moving a bit, but it's pretty stable. This is because a 5th note interval is extremely close to a 3:2 frequency ratio. It's only off by 0.1%. Now let's look at the Lissajous pattern of a major 3rd interval. As you can see, it's pretty unstable. This is because a major 3rd interval is kind of close to a 5:4 frequency ratio. It's off by 0.8%. Furthermore, if you play chords with more than 2 notes, which is pretty common in music, you'll have additional errors that all stack on top of each other. Clearly, as an oscilloscope musician, you'd rather use the exact whole number frequency ratios over the inexact ratios offered by 12-tone equal temperament. A tuning system that uses exact whole number ratios is called just intonation, or pure intonation. This umbrella of tuning systems is its own awesome topic, but it's out of the scope of this video. I just want you to have 2 takeaways here. Number 1, just intonation looks stable on an oscilloscope. Number 2, no matter what software or workflow you use to utilize just intonation in oscilloscope music, it's going to take a lot of time and effort. But let me tell you something. Sometimes in life, you have a choice for something to be easy or for it to be good. Well, that's everything I wanted to go over today. There's so much more I could talk about, but my goal here was to get you thinking like an oscilloscope musician about the connection between what you see and what you hear. I hope this inspired some of you to try oscilloscope music yourself. If so, I have another video explaining exactly how to get started, even if you have no experience. Be sure to subscribe for more video essays covering fascinating hidden topics. I've also got an oscilloscope collaboration in the works that you won't want to miss. Now, whether your voice draws a heart, a spinning cube, or just some squiggles, I hope you enjoyed the video, and I'll see you next time.